And you get down on your knees and you say, Lord, so-and-so did me wrong. And you know that. I forgive them. And if you are about to do anything to them for what they did to me, please don't, because I've forgiven them. Can you pray that? Wouldn't it be something about that time the Lord say, really? Because tomorrow I was going to break both their legs. Could we hold this prayer back for about 2 days? Guys, we are supposed to forgive if we want forgiveness. It's a commandment. Wasn't a suggestion. You don't find please in front of any of this. Look at verse 38. How's this for a commandment? Give. Every time I read that, I see a guy standing next to a stopped wagon train with a pistol in his hand and a handkerchief over his face. Give. Do you find that? Do you think this verse 38 says, you think maybe you could give? You guys, I'm God and I could use some money. You think maybe you could give me something? He said, give. Now, I know the rest of the verse. Hey, it's a great truth, is it not? Given it shall be given unto you, good measure, pressed down and shaken together and running over some men, given to your bosom. For with the same measure that you meet withal, it shall be measured to you again. I believe that. I just don't push it. I've been in some churches, and I'm telling you, some people, they open up their wallet and they pull out their $1 and they give it, and then they kind of leave their wallet hanging open a little while because 20s are going to fall from heaven. I gave. I'm ready to have it pressed down, running over. I believe God's going to fulfill that scripture. I'm just not keeping an account. I just think you ought to give. Say, when? When God tells you to give. To who? To who God tells you to give it to. Not just your friends. We just sent a check to a guy. I don't know him, never met him. I know him as a name, don't know anything about him. I take it back. I know one thing about him. I know he's an independent Baptist pastor, and I know his wife's got cancer, and it looks like she's going to die. And an evangelist friend of mine, Brother Rick, an evangelist friend of mine told me about him. Said that his wife is not doing well, and that, it's not looking good. I don't even know this guy. The Lord smote my heart. I think you ought to pray for people. But sometimes I think we pray because it's a cheap way out. So we sent him some money. You know what I told him to do with the money? Look, we sent him the money, and I said, go away with your wife for a few days. If my wife was dying, and I couldn't do anything about it, and I was a typical Baptist preacher and have 2 nickels to rub together, and somebody said, here's a check. You know what I call it? You know what I call that? I call that going and making a memory. Because shortly, that's all he's going to have of his wife. Let's let him go someplace. Have room service bring supper. Because not long, that's all he's going to have. Say, why'd you do it? Because that verse said I'm supposed to give. And why don't you be honest? You have been faced with some situations. And when giving came up, you tried to figure out a reason on why you didn't have to. You tried to find some way to justify not giving. Isn't that right? But he said, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. Look at John chapter 13. John chapter 13. I know that it wasn't the 10 commandments. I know it's commandments the Lord gave, because look what he says in verse 34. A new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another, as I have loved you, that you also love one another. Then we are commanded to love each other, correct? Don't sit there and go, I do. I love everybody. Oh, come on, who are you kidding? You know what I thank God about that verse? I'm telling you the truth. You're going to laugh. You know what I thank God that verse doesn't say it? That verse says we are supposed to love each other, correct? I am so thankful it doesn't say we got to like each other. Now, why don't you be honest? Down in our country years ago, they had a guy named Will Rogers. He was a humorist. And Will Rogers is recorded to have said this statement: I never met a man I didn't like. He was either lying or he never met a man. Don't you dare tell me you never met anybody you didn't like. You're lying through your teeth. Not only have you met people you didn't like, if you're really honest, you saw people as soon as they walked through the door, you didn't even know them, you didn't like them. Come on, that's the truth. This happened. This was glorious. This was a blessing. I'm going to A few years back, I'm going to debate these guys on the King James Bible, national TV, New King James, New American Standard, blah, 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 all these guys. And I'm sitting on the aisle seat of this airplane, and like 3 rows up on the other side of the aisle is this guy. And he's one of those guys that he is so glad you got to meet him. That kind of guy. I can just tell. He is talking across the aisle to this other guy, and this other guy is thinking, I know that murder is a federal offense, especially on a plane. I can't kill him. If I could get the window open, I'd throw him out. I mean, this guy is just, and this guy's just, he is talking to him like, I am just making your day. You're so fortunate to have me talk to you. And you know what, I'm looking up here, 3 rows up, and I said, I'm looking at this guy, I went, oh, Lord, you are good to me. Thank you for not putting him here. Because I would find a way to get this window open, and I'd stuff that sucker out. Halfway to Chattanooga, that guy turned around, locked his eyes on mine, and said, hello, Dr. Gipp. You know who it was? James White. James White, I call him Snow White, the infamous Bible corrector, King James hater. I was thrilled. You know why? Because I didn't like him before I knew who he was. I said, whoa, even my prejudices let up God. Now, why don't you be honest? Why don't you admit that there are just some people you don't like? You still got to love them. You know what don't like them means? Really, you know what that means? That means you don't ask them out for pizza after church. That's like saying, you know, could I have a root canal without Novocaine, please? I love pain. There are just some people you don't want to fellowship with. Isn't that right? Am I the only person like this? Is there somebody that is saved and you just go, I really wouldn't want to have coffee with that person. Maybe I'm the person. I can live with this. There's somebody you just don't want to have a meal with. You just don't want them over your house. You just don't want to have some fellowship time. You'll end up killing each other because you don't like them. I don't care. I'm not telling you to like them. The Bible doesn't tell you got to like them. It says you got to love them. So what does that mean? That means if their house burns down, you better be standing there with a check for about $1,500 to help them get it built. You say, but I don't like them. You don't have to like them. You have to love them. Let me tell you about my wife. My wife is a tremendous lady. She is a tremendous lady. She has been, for 35 years, she has been a tremendous wife to me. For 31 years, she has been a wonderful mother to our oldest son, and our 2 boys have been born since then. To this day, when Valentine's Day comes around, she goes out and buys some little kind of Valentine candy and sends a little Valentine package to our kids. I got this kid, 31 years old. He's an ex-Marine. And he says, Mom, I love those marshmallow bunnies. Oh. You want to say something to him? I'm not. She speaks to ladies and they give her money for it, and she sends the money to missionaries' wives. She helped buy a refrigerator for a missionary's wife in New Guinea, gas-powered refrigerator, so she had a refrigerator. My wife is a good lady. She is kind. She is thoughtful. I've told her. I said, you know, if we had $1 every time somebody said to her, how do you put up with him? Our bus would be paid for. And I know what it's like. I feel sorry for her. I told her, I said, you must have really been wicked in a former life to have to marry me in this one. And I've already told her this. I said, listen, if you ever decide to divorce me, I am testifying on your behalf. She is married to a horrible guy who is married to a wonderful woman. And I don't have a bad thing to say about my wife. If I did, I wouldn't tell anybody here. I wouldn't tell anybody who has a heart that pumps. I wouldn't tell a human being. If I don't understand you guys saying you love your wife and then badmouth her to the guys. I don't understand you ladies saying you love your husband and then have coffee with the lady next door and go, oh, I just can't believe he did this. Oh, that sounds like love. Now, I'm telling you, my wife is a tremendous lady. So after church, I'm standing out here, Pastor, Brother Elam, Dennis, Brother Jones, we're standing there, and one of those guys goes, boy, God's blessed you with a really good wife. And I go, what you think? Well, she just seems so godly. Yeah, she knows how to act in here. Well, I've heard her play the harp. I said, yeah, you ought to hear her harping in that bus.